Thank you all for being here, finding the alternate reality of the Taylor stage on the other side of the floor from the other yellow rooms. And I'm very excited to talk about stablecoins and meme coins today. And broadly, I think where we're seeing market development head. At the time, I think I submitted this talk idea. It felt like the world was a very different place. This was, I think, maybe like 3 or 4 months ago. And it already feels like the space has shifted in major ways. The positive news being that I haven't had to rework the talk because things are kind of playing out in a lot of the ways that I think we've been seeing happen at Privy for a little while. So to kick off, hi, I'm Henri. I started a company called Privy, and we build wallet infrastructure basically for every user, for every app, for every bank. The point being that self-custody and generally holding digital assets entails having a wallet that you can hold it in. And we believe that embedding that wallet within the product creates much more powerful experiences that enable really anybody to access these rails. So broadly, we do 4 things. This is kind of the inevitable shilling that happens. I'm front-loading it so that we can focus on the other stuff after. But we build user onboarding. This is authentication, so anybody can come in. You can also integrate this with your own auth system. This is embedded wallets. These are basically low-level signers that you're able to integrate into your product in order to automate a number of on-chain actions and give your users self-custodial wallets built into your client or your server. This is key management. And finally, integration into any on-chain system that you need to power these flows. With that, I'm going to kick off and kind of talk about what we're seeing in the market and the way we think things are playing out. So what is the state of the market in 2025? I guess we are halfway through the year, and it's been quite a year thus far. And the first thing I guess I want to talk about is closing the gap. I think this is like a slide that I took from our Series A pitch deck. So this was back in 2023, and I think the question at the time was, what are you doing working on Web3 infra when in fact it seems like Web3 infra only serves Web3 infra? And the very exciting thing is that broadly it feels like we have closed the gap in many ways. The space has come an extraordinarily long way these past few years when it comes to the 3 sort of major problems that I think have hobbled developers in crypto, which is to say scalability, usability, and security. There's a lot of work left to do, but broadly I think we've kind of run out of excuses for saying like, well, the infra is not ready enough, so my product should be graded on a curve. And as we look top down, I think this past half year has been incredibly impactful in terms of what's happening in the space. So we're seeing increased activity across the board. From a US-centric standpoint, we're seeing regulatory updates as pertains to stablecoin legislation. We're seeing institutional capital come in, and I guess erstwhile crypto skeptics like JP Morgan actually investing in the space in a really big way. We're seeing public market activity related to this. And this is obviously all trickling down. Little shout out to us. We're seeing M&A activity with important fintechs moving into the space more aggressively and all of the opportunities that opens. And this is obviously leading all the path to fundraising. And here's a shout out to one of our customers, Slash, who, these are companies that are built on crypto rails that are not self-spoken crypto companies, but that are leveraging this infrastructure in deep ways. And so across the board, we're seeing all of this activity, and maybe most excitingly to me, we're seeing really impactful product releases. And all of this, as a side note, is about a week's worth of news from, call it 3 weeks ago. So we've had 6 months, and it seems like the cycle is accelerating. And at the time, Shopify had introduced USDC pay-ins with Stripe and Coinbase. I thought, man, this is a very exciting announcement. It's probably going to be one of the more exciting product announcements of 2025. Obviously, lo and behold, on Monday, I promised somebody from Robinhood I would quote. I think it's Daddy Vladdy is the name that they're giving internally to the suit meme that is occurring here. But obviously, being able to trade private and public securities on crypto rails is also extraordinarily exciting. So we're seeing these rails make their way into products that are really built for new types of users. So top down, I think things are looking very, very exciting. And in many ways, it feels clear to say, like, the future is now. We've been waiting for, all of these signs that the market is ready, and clearly these signs are here in front of us. And the time to build these products that leverage these rails is today. And so with that, I'm going to move into kind of the meat of the talk, which is a tale of 2 cities. We serve about 1,000 teams across the space. Through them, we have about 75 million accounts that we power. And broadly, I think you can kind of split it across 4 main spaces: fintech and payments, DeFi and trading, social and gaming, and what I'm going to call agentic crypto. And for the sake of this talk, and I think a lot of where we're seeing the most activity, really I want to focus on 2 spaces. The first is fintech and payments. And here I'm going to call this crypto as rails. These are people who are trying to leverage more efficient, basically, money movement rails and asset holding rails in order to power underlying fintech and payments infrastructure. So here, for example, on our customers that we serve, you have folks like Toku. Toku is an employer of record. They enable people to get paid out globally using stablecoins. So Privy, for example, has a Nigerian contractor that we work with, and this contractor would much rather be paid in USDC than in Naira. Naira's lost a lot of value against a dollar these past few years. And using Privy's customers, so this kind of Toku using Privy using Toku using Privy, which is a lot of fun for us, we get to pay Michael out in USDC, in fact. Lightspark is building a payments rail on Bitcoin. Kulipa builds card issuance for stablecoin accounts. Blackbird is building a payment system for restaurants. Karza is building a neobank in Pakistan. These are basically the types of crypto as rails, fintech and payments customers that we serve. The sort of second leg is DeFi and trading. And this is broadly crypto as an investment class, as assets that are tradable. And this is the world of customers like Hyperliquid or Pump that enable really high frequency trading on very crypto native sort of surfaces, perps and meme coins respectively. This is Jupiter, I think the biggest Solana DEX at this point. DYDX, Vector. These are a lot of mobile apps and desktop apps that enable people to trade crypto basically very aggressively. And as we look at it, really a tale of 2 cities emerges, which is to say we've got stable coins on the one hand and meme coins on the other. We've got these 2 aspects of crypto, and I think a lot of the question for us as infrastructure developers is how do they feed each other? How do we sort of orient our product around serving these 2 spaces that are both growing extraordinarily rapidly and powering a lot of infrastructure development? And I guess maybe to put it in perspective, these are very different markets. Stable coins, the core premise might be the first $1 trillion fintech is going to be built on crypto rails. This is the first time that we get to build global products in fintech with no sort of landlock because of currency. It's an absolutely massive TAM, billions of people, obviously. And a lot of the LTV for how you consider the user looks like traditional fintech. On the other side, you've got meme coins. This is kind of emergent behavior from magic internet money. It's a smaller TAM, hundreds of thousands to millions of active users. It has really powerful network effects where broadly markets follow liquidity in a big way. And the LTV is insane. I would argue that trading customers today in crypto are probably some of the most valuable end users that the internet has spawned. These are people who are paying tens of dollars in fees every month without asking questions. And the question then is, how do we serve both for us as an infrastructure provider? And I think from that insight, you can also kind of glean where I think the space is going in a deep way. So we kind of call this the great crypto recursion. And I think basically the core thesis is that these disparate markets feed each other. Stable coins and meme coins are sort of building a self-reinforcing loops where you have basically the advent of on-chain liquidity through stable coins that will enable more people to trade these assets. And conversely, people coming in to trade find their way back to stable coins. I think, to start, Tether, which I guess is the first mainstream stable coin, was built as a way for Bitfinex customers to keep assets digitally on nights and weekends when they didn't want to revert back to US dollars because then they couldn't trade anymore. So I think that sort of microcosm of how Tether came to be is actually playing out on a much wider scale in the space as a whole. So what does that mean specifically? We think these disparate markets will feed each other. Well, first, this is through infrastructure. And obviously this is very first-hand knowledge that we have as Privy, but broadly I think building across these 2 spaces allows us to serve both spaces better. And I will say, bluntly, I think meme coins are kind of showing us where stable coins are going, call it a year from now, where I'll give an example. We had folks building agentic trading platforms. These are basically trading platforms where you want to set up an LLM to trade on your behalf. We had to add the ability for people to delegate access to a user wallet to an app signer that basically you're going to give some control to an LLM over to. And in order to do that, we had to build transaction policies so that you could enable the LLM to take certain subsets of actions, but not all actions. The fear being if the LLM hallucinates, you'll get completely wrecked. And broadly today, we work with neobanks who have the exact same need. It's a very different customer, but neobanks obviously have risk committees and want to enable multi-sigs, whereby certain transactions over a threshold have to be approved by additional parties. It's the same underlying system that was built for one customer type that serves the other. Likewise on latency, we have wallets that can sign things either on device in sub 40 milliseconds or in a secure enclave in sub 150 milliseconds. And these are latency times that were pushed by trading customers, but are extraordinarily useful if you're trying to build a consumer-grade stablecoin experience. So broadly across the board, we're kind of seeing that the crypto natives show us where the space is going, and then that same technology is picked up by people building fintech more broadly. And yeah, this kind of point I was making is across the board where we're seeing that play out, and so it creates a really good roadmap for us. The second piece, obviously, is that both feed on-chain liquidity. The analogy I like is, stable coins are to traditional payments rails what Starlink is to, call it, fiber or coax, depending on the country you run in. And broadly, we are trying to beam money basically to the cloud and have cloud-native systems to move that money around. And what we're seeing is that while fintech can onboard users massively, we have billions of users that will come into crypto through holding digital assets via traditional fintechs. These are customers of Revolut, for example, or Klarna that are going to hold assets through these apps that they might not know it's crypto, but this is their pathway into digital assets. These are Robinhood customers who are holding tokenized securities for the first time. Conversely, a lot of assets and a lot of liquidity is being onboarded via DeFi. And there is basically this recursive loop between the two where users come in through one door, assets come in through the other, and together they kind of fluidify the system altogether. So this is the second way, and I think like these markets are really feeding each other. And again, I think fintech is kind of being fed by DeFi, and eventually the two will merge. And we're seeing this play out in the wild. Two examples, I think, from recent months. Obviously, one is Coinbase and Morpho. So any Coinbase user can now actually take out loans on their Bitcoin and other crypto holdings via Morpho. So this is, the DeFi mullet, fintech in the front, DeFi in the back. But this is the first merger of these two worlds where traditional customers, and again, you might say Coinbase customers are already kind of crypto-pilled, but are getting access to DeFi primitives and are starting to see the two worlds blend together. And then obviously the other one is from Monday, where people get to buy OpenAI stock on Robinhood. And so tokenized securities overall are yet another way in which these markets are feeding each other. And you get these insane effects of new sort of emergent behaviors that you wouldn't have seen before. This is kind of the most, I think, visceral exploration of how these two spaces feed each other. But, as a proud fartcoin holder on Solana, you now get to trade your fartcoin for Tesla X stock. And so again, the line between the two is blurring, I think, much more rapidly than we could have anticipated at the start of the year. And this is only accelerating. So with that, how do we take a step back and think about what does that mean for us as builders? What should we be focused on? How do we actually make good use of these extraordinarily high leverage moments in a space that's accelerating very, very quickly? And I think what I would sort of say is we're in a very special place as people like us attending ETHCC and who have been thinking about crypto for a little bit, which is ostensibly we understand these rails in a way that few people out in traditional financial markets do today. And the really core goal is how do we use this strength and how do we make sure that this strength doesn't turn into a weakness? How do we make sure that we don't lose the forest for the trees and basically are so blinded by the crypto rails and the exciting primitives that we're building that we actually lose the advantage that we have in building next generation financial products in the space? So I think the first rule I have is learn from Apollo. There is a really good book called The Secret of Apollo, very exciting subtitle, Systems Management in American and European Space Programs. And broadly, they talk a lot about how in 1969, when the Apollo missions launched, a lot of the tech that they were using was completely outdated. All the computer systems were like very old by standards, and the space had evolved so much, and so they were running basically outdated systems by the time the mission launched. But this was a 10-year mission plan, and they couldn't afford to re-architect a mission every time advancements in silicon came about. And this is a mistake I think we see a lot in crypto, which is the primitives are getting better so much faster. Wallet systems are getting better so much faster. And there's a temptation to say, I'm going to redesign my product now because ZK proofs have improved and I get 10x efficiencies if I actually relaunch it today. And this means teams that should be launching in 6 months or launching in 2 years because they keep redesigning their entire system from the ground up. And yes, they get 10x improvements, but they actually delay launch and delay finding product market fit far too long. So I think the lesson from Apollo is hold yourself to the product spec. Have a launch plan, have a set of guardrails for what you need to achieve with your launch, and then focus on mission launch and don't deviate from the plan unless you can't meet your launch objectives. And so that would be the first. I think this is something that we work on a lot with our customers, but broadly, we want to make sure that our tech is future-proof. We, to my knowledge, have not made a breaking change in our SDKs since inception. And I think that is about making sure that you don't have to worry about launching and then iterating. But I think a lot of what we try and work on with our customers is how do you iterate in this space, even though the underlying primitives are changing very quickly. The second is understand your audience and speak to them in their language. There's this very good presentation from Skylar Richards at Ironfish, now a Coinbase company. And he describes how crypto people like to talk about crypto products. And so you have on the right this great marketing for an amazing product, ACH processing for P2P transactions with low fees. You could imagine this launched earlier this week at FCC. And in fact, this is a description of Venmo, fast, safe social payments. And so I think understanding who your audience is and talking to them in a language that actually resonates with them is extraordinarily important. And it's increasingly important as crypto rails go mainstream, as we serve new categories of users. And as these users fundamentally may not care about the primitives themselves, but care about security, care about reliability, care about speed, all of the things that we can serve, but we have to talk about the jobs to be done. And so, the tech is so cool is something that I think we get to geek out on, and we should. But it shouldn't make its way into basically how you justify your core value prop. The third rule is specifically, again, this is, I think, the main change that we're going to see as builders in the space, and that is an evolution of the customers we serve, making sure we don't confuse B2B and B2C, making sure we don't confuse devs and users. Historically, crypto consumers have been developers, and so we were dealing with this super concentrated, hyper-technical customer segment that we could build for and talk about things in a way that most, denizens of the internet won't think about. And so I think it is going to be worth rethinking a lot of how you're thinking about your customer base and doing away with some of what has been true in the past. I think a lot of what is sort of tried and true practice for historically vastly successful crypto products may no longer serve, depending on the type of product that you're building out. And so that is something I would urge sort of anybody to kind of reconsider, which is, as the market grows, who are you building for? And as you pick a lane, so to speak, and build in stablecoins or in meme coins, and eventually into the merged market, that is to say digital assets overall, how can you make sure that you are really understanding who your core customer is, where they're coming from, how they're making purchasing decisions? So with that, I'm just going to maybe synthesize a little bit and conclude. The infrastructure is ready. We are seeing the market form before our very eyes at a pace that I don't think we could have anticipated coming into the year and even coming into the month. Stablecoins and meme coins are feeding each other and feeding this growth really symbiotically. I think both basically participate in adding users into the space and adding assets into the space. And we're getting this sort of liquidity flywheel via the two markets coming together. And increasingly, I think we'll continue to see a blurring of the lines as Robinhood and Coinbase have kind of shown us. And the winners are going to be the companies that are able to bring the stack to new users. And I think a core focus on product and making sure that the infrastructure that you use, using wallet infrastructure like Privy, basically serves the core product, and that you're customizing your flows to serve a customer you understand, is going to be, I think, how you build differentiated crypto products moving forward. So with that, quick request for startups. I think it's a bold take, but the things that we're seeing as very exciting are companies that are actually trying to use these rails to build global products that were hitherto impossible to build. Conversely, companies that are trying to give hyperlocal access to dollar value, to loans, to basically all of the things that we take for granted as, I guess, Westerners and Americans to some extent, but that a lot of people across the world have never had access to. Obviously, there's a lot to be done with tokenized assets of all sorts. And finally, I think a lot of what we've seen through SocialFi and through the last few years of DeFi and sort of gamified finance are going to make their way into broader fintech. So this is stuff that I would urge anybody to think about. And obviously, if you're building this stuff, come talk to us. Thank you. I don't know if we have time for questions.
Yeah, we have time for some questions if somebody wants to ask.
Thank you. It's very insightful, and always appreciate your presentation. Focus on the product and the on the market. Actually, two questions. One is, I don't know if it's actually directly related to this, but your take, given your work in the wallet space, I've always, I have an inside debate in me what the future of wallet will be, whether it will be a wallet like what Privy was doing, like wallet as a service, or wallet will become kind of a credit card authentication identity when each user has its own unique wallet, and it's just taking it from an app to an app. And we'll have to get your take on this. And also in the more strategic, high level view, a lot of what is going on in crypto right now, it's financialization of crypto. I came for crypto because of the trust layer. How do you see, the financialization merge with, digital sovereignty, empowering the end user and all this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, these are great questions, and I would take my answers with a big grain of salt, but I'm happy to run my mouth. I think on the first one, the reality is I think both is, I guess, the answer. I think it is inevitable that dominant products and the best product experiences will want to own the account system. And this is how I see wallets evolving broadly. Wallets are accounts, and in a world in which holding digital assets is not the exception, but the norm, then this is broadly something that integrates into an account system overall and lets you hold value. I think a lot of companies and a lot of products, and this is kind of the first time in which we're seeing crypto not as an island unto itself, but as something that incumbents can use to build better products as well. I think as we continue to see that acceleration, basically products will want to own their own wallets. So the Privy model, I think is here to stay, and there's a lot more for us to build as part of that. But I think conversely, you see this, and I see the two models being very complementary. You see companies like Phantom that are increasingly becoming consumer hubs and, in a sense, personal finance apps. And so I really see this as a distinction between B2B and developer tooling, which is what we do, and consumer wallets, which is what a Phantom or a MetaMask do. And I suspect you'll see both. I think it's crazy to think that a user would have one account all across the web. I use my bank differently than I use my social games differently than I use my grocery store app. And I think likewise, you'll have different wallets that you use for different purposes with different expectations as to the MFA requirements, security requirements, signers, passkeys, et cetera, et cetera. But I think conversely, users shouldn't have as many wallets as they have apps. So you'll see some consolidation of sort of interoperability across these wallet systems is kind of what I'm seeing play out. To the second question, I think financialization is here to stay for a little while. And I had this debate yesterday where somebody said something along the lines of, all crypto won't be fintech, but all fintech will be crypto. And then I think somebody else answered, all crypto will be fintech and all fintech won't be crypto. So I think the debate is out. I just think it's really hard. I come from Web3 to some extent and distributed systems and trust systems as you do. And I think it's just really hard to imagine the emergent properties of a world in which the majority of our lives, including our holdings, are happening online in a way that hasn't been true before. And so I think it's going to take a second, and at least for our part, we're extraordinarily excited to see fintechs move into the space. But over time, I think we'll return to some of these questions of like trust systems as more and more comes online, so to speak.
Hey, well, congrats on the Stripe acquisition, and I want to ask about that. So, like, how does that change your, roadmap, your users, right? Like right now you were saying, yeah, memecoins, etc. was one. The others are more fintech. I guess Stripe maybe plays in the fintech one, but I don't know if this changes anything for us, the degens, let's say.
It's a great question. The answer is no. Hopefully, it mostly just accelerates our roadmap. It accelerates our roadmap with regards to broadly the engineering resources that we have access to. Stripe knows a thing or two about writing APIs, writing docs, scaling products globally. It changes our roadmap with regards to money movement. I still think some of the major hurdles in getting onto crypto is moving from fiat to crypto in the first place, getting from the coax cable to the cloud and helping people move their assets. So those are a lot of the parts that we're really excited to work very closely with Stripe on. But broadly, I think a big part of the acquisition and the thesis was predicated on three things, and those were Privy is an autonomous, independent product in a sense. We've built a lot for a lot of customers. There is so much more for us to build, and the next few years are absolutely essential to the development of the space, and us being able to continue to operate as we have is really important. So that was one. Two is, in a sense, stablecoins and memecoins, which is a big part of our worldview, are both extraordinarily important to the development of the space. One brings users, one brings assets. One teaches us how to use the tech. One helps us deploy this tech at scale. And I think a big part of the agreement up front, obviously Stripe, you're right, has been doing a lot more work in stablecoins and in traditional fintech than they have in the degen side of the house or the crypto native side of the house. And I think a big part of the thesis was we must stay true to our identity as a company and our ability to serve both parts of the market because they feed each other exactly in the way that I'm rolling out. So when I wrote the presentation proposal for HCC, we were not talking to Stripe, and I had no idea that we would then be presenting today in this configuration. But the actual talk itself hasn't changed all that much because of it. And then the third part of the thesis was the ability to work with any provider. Whether that provider is competitive with Stripe or even with Bridge, we need to be able to work with whoever is best for our customers. And it is so early in the space, and there are so many ways in which our customers want optionality through the providers that they work with. And so those were kind of the three tenets of us working together and ones that we're really excited about.
If somebody have any other questions, you can ask Mr. Speaker privately because we have no time. But thank you for the speech.
Thank you.
Great presentation.